Hello rail fans, it's Sierra number 52 rail fan. That's S-E-R-A, the number sign, 52 rail fan. And welcome back to my G-scale layout. Today we're going to give you an overview of coal operations on the BNSF Mountain Subdivision. Now our coal operations are very unique in the fact that we actually haul live coal. Not simulated coal, not decorative rock, live coal that's actually from Utah. And another thing that also adds to the uniqueness of this operation is the fact that I am not aware of any other G-scale model railroader that hauls live coal in their coal operations. Now I could be wrong, and if I am, please add a comment so that I can get in touch with you and I can take a look at how your operations work. So what we're looking at here is the locomotives are spotting their coal train under the coal hopper in preparation to fill the cars. So once the train is spotted under the chute, which is connected to the hopper, this little metal piece is slid down and put into place with pins, as you can see. And this chute actually is placed directly and even slightly inside the car so that we have a perfect fit that allows coal to be dropped directly into the center of the coal hopper with very little to no spillage on either side. So once everything is in place, the operator gets the train moving via remote control, which initiates the process of dropping or unloading the coal into each individual hopper. Now this method of loading coal is very similar, if not the same, to the prototype railroads in how they load their coal trains. The train is kept at a continuous slow speed while coal is dropped into each individual hopper. Now on the prototype railroads, generally there is a pacer that is set on the locomotives or the lead locomotive, which keeps the train rolling at the same continuous slow speed. Generally this speed is about 1 to 2 miles an hour, whereas on this G-scale layout, it is much more challenging because the operator of the train is operating it via remote control. Now this does add a challenge to loading coal trains on the layout because the operator has to increase the speed with each car that is filled with coal. Each time a hopper is loaded with coal, it adds additional weight to the train, which slows the speed of the train. So the operator needs to be cognizant and pay attention if the train begins to slow down with each car being loaded. So generally, after each car is loaded, the operator has to slightly increase the speed on the remote control to actually keep the train moving at the same continuous speed, if that makes sense. If the operator is not paying attention and there's too much weight added to the train, then the train will slow or stop mid-process. So there was actually a lot of thought process that went into designing this coal chute. As you can see, there is a triangle, if you will, cut directly into the center of this coal chute, which allows the coal to form a cone-shaped pattern as it is being loaded into each individual hopper. This does two things. It keeps the coal inside the center of the car and minimizes spillage outside of the hopper. And number two, it creates more realistic looking coal loads in the hoppers. So another design feature of the chute was the fact that it was designed to allow the coal to completely fill the hopper and pile up all the way up to the base of the chute. Once the coal reaches the base of the chute, the coal actually stops falling out of the chute. This minimizes spillage outside of the car, and also, in case there's an emergency where the train has to be stopped, coal will not continuously spill out of the chute onto the tracks and the surrounding area outside of the hopper. Another challenging aspect of this operation is the fact that coal has to be dropped with perfect precision timing into each individual hopper. If you'll notice, as the hopper rolls under the chute, coal is not dropped immediately. Rather, the operator of the loader waits until the car passes approximately a quarter way under the chute before dropping the coal. This allows the entire coal bay to be filled with coal and minimizes spillage outside of the car. The coal trains on my layout are approximately 24 cars in length. This is done for two reasons. Number one, the weight of the entire train. Each individual coal hopper loaded with coal is approximately 9.5 to 10 pounds. So with 24 loaded coal hoppers, the entire train is approximately 240 pounds. Now this requires multiple locomotives to pull this heavy train. Generally, I will add 3 to 4 locomotives at the head end of the train, all 6-axle locomotives, generally Dash 9s or SD70 Max or SD70 Aces. And then halfway through the train, after 12 cars, I will generally add mid-train helpers of 3 to 4 locomotives. Now I do this because I actually need as much power as I can get to be able to haul coal trains over my layout. For those of you that are familiar with my layout, and if not, you'll see in this video, my layout is a mountainous railroad, thus the mountain subdivision. It actually runs up and over a mountain range, or a small hill, if you will, on my property. Now, to accomplish this, I had to construct my railroad in a way to minimize the percent of the grades so that I could actually haul trains. My grades reach anywhere between 1.5 to 3.5%, and several horseshoe curves had to be constructed as to minimize the percent of the grade and allow the trains to gently climb the grades and reach the summit of the hill or the mountain. So what I have found is, in order to haul a loaded 24-car coal train, I need a minimum of 7 locomotives to accomplish this task. I've actually tried only with 6, generally 3 up front and 3 mid-train helpers, and noticed that the train struggled, especially the mid-train helpers, and the wheels actually began to slip or spin, which can cause several issues with your train and damage your locomotives. So I determined 7 locomotives were the minimum power required to haul these heavy coal trains. In this video, and every once in a while, I will actually add an additional helper, which is actually distributed power, DPU, to the rear end of the train to assist in the shoving process to get the trains up and over the mountain. Now again, an additional challenge to having a rear end DPU is that the DPU has to be linked with other locomotives on the train. And the only way to do this is to actually link the DPU with my mid-train helpers because of the length of the train. This generally works on a straight railroad or a railroad where there is a line of sight through the entire train. My railroad is challenging in the fact that I have several curves and several cuts that the train travels through, and the locomotives actually lose sight with each other, which can cause your linked locomotives to not communicate with one another. My mid-train helpers on my coal trains are actually manned helpers, meaning I have to have two separate remotes to operate the train. One remote and one operator operating the head-end locomotives, and the other remote and operator, if I have two operators, operate the mid-train helpers. This again creates another challenge in my coal operations, because the operator of the mid-train helpers has to pay attention to both the slack and the couplers in the cars between the mid-train helpers and the head-end locomotives, as well as pay attention to the speed of the head-end locomotives. For example, once the head-end locomotives begin to climb a steeper grade, their speed actually slows down, which means the operator of the mid-train helpers has to increase their speed to begin to actually be able to shove the train over the mountain. When shoving the train, the operator of the mid-train helpers has to pay attention to the slack and the couplers, because if there is too much slack in the train, then the train can actually break apart, which can cause damage to the couplers. Or, if the mid-train helpers are shoving too hard, then cars between the mid-train helpers and the head-end locomotives can actually buckle and derail. This concept is discussed in one of my other videos when talking about manned helpers. As earlier discussed, I sometimes put a rear-end helper, which is actually a distributed power unit, or DPU, at the rear end of the train to assist in the shoving process up and over the mountains. While this process can be helpful, it can also cause problems because the rear end helper is linked to the mid-train helpers. And if there is a loss in communication, this could cause problems such as too much slack in the train or too much shoving, which ultimately can cause damage to couplers and derailments. If I run a rear-end DPU, I will generally have 3 locomotives at the head end of the train, 3 locomotives as the manned helpers, and 1 locomotive in the rear DPU position. If I choose to not have a rear-end locomotive, I will generally have 4 locomotives at the head end of the train and 4 locomotives acting as mid-train helpers. This is to ensure that there is enough power to pull and shove the train up and over steep grades on my layout. In this video, you will generally see a configuration with hauling live coal trains over the mountain sub as 3 locomotives being placed in the head-end position, 3 locomotives being placed mid-train as the manned helpers, and 1 locomotive being placed as a DPU at the rear end of the train. So for a moment, let's sit back and enjoy the sights and sounds of live coal being hauled over the mountain subdivision. As you may be able to tell, this is one of the steepest locations on my layout. This curve, which is known as Cabana Curve, is estimated to be approximately 3.5%. From this location, the train travels around Cabana Curve, which is a horseshoe curve, goes into Rogers Cut, and then travels around one more large horseshoe curve known as Big Ten prior to reaching the summit. At this location, the head-end locomotives slow significantly, and the speeds of the mid-train helpers and rear-end DPU increase in speed to approximately 5 to 6 miles an hour faster than that of the head-end locomotives in order to shove the train around the curve and through the cut up to the summit. Here we see the train making its way through Rogers Cut and rounding Big Ten Curve prior to reaching the summit. This is still a fairly steady uphill grade, but is not quite as much as the percentage of the grade around Cabana Curve. The grade on Big Ten is estimated to be approximately 2.5%. Here we see the locomotives pulling this loaded coal train around the final turn of Big Ten Curve before reaching the summit. As the locomotives pass by, listen to the power as they struggle to pull this 240-pound train up the 2.5% grade. After the treacherous climb, the loaded coal train finally reaches the summit of Raccoon Pass. Notice that the train begins to pick up speed as the head-end locomotives crest the summit and begin their descent. This creates a challenge for the mid-train helpers and the rear-end DPU as they have to begin to back off the throttle as to not cause buckling in the train, but at the same time continue shoving until they crest the summit and begin their descent. Here in this shot, as the train makes its way through Hetch Hetchy Junction and over the inside gateway, you will see the configuration of 4 locomotives at the head end and 4 locomotives as manned mid-train helpers with no rear-end DPU. This is just as efficient as if there were 3 locomotives at the head end, 3 mid-train, and 1 shoving as a rear DPU. The only challenge to this configuration is the amount of slack at the end of the train between the manned helpers and the rear end of the train. When a locomotive is shoving at the rear, obviously it is lessening the slack in the train at the rear end of the train and providing just that much more shoving power from the rear portion of the train. So once the coal reaches its destination, if you will, we had to figure out a way to unload it from the car. And I didn't want to have to pick a loaded coal car, which is, like I said, 9.5 or 10 pounds, up off the track every time and unload it into some sort of a container. Because each time you pick a car up like that is carrying that much weight, you risk damaging the car in some way, shape, or form. Whether it be the couplers, whether it be a step or something on the side of the car. So we looked at how the prototype railroads do it, and the common use or way of unloading coal from a car now is to use a rotary dumper. So we actually had a rotary dumper constructed, which is what you're looking at here. And once we constructed the dumper, we of course had to figure out a way to clamp the car into place so that when you rolled the dumper over and turned the car on its side or almost inverted it upside down, the car wouldn't come flying off the tracks and cause damage. So we constructed these little clamps to clamp down onto the car. They're actually spring-loaded clamps. So it allows full pressure to be pressing down on the top of the car. And that holds it in place as the car is turned over and the coal is dumped out. So we actually dumped the coal into a chute which we constructed. For the most part, it keeps the coal pretty much in the chute. Every once in a while, we'll get some stragglers that'll come out, and you know, we might lose a little bit of coal, but not enough to affect my operation, at least at this point. So the coal actually is dumped onto the chute, slides down into a bucket that we have in place below the chute. And then, of course, I take that bucket and refill the coal tipple or the coal loader. So it's just kind of a rotation process or a continuous process. Once the coal is dumped out of the car is rotated back up into place. The clamps are released. And then the car is actually shoved off of the rotary dumper And what we did is we constructed the track afterwards in kind of a hump yard fashion, to where generally the car will, once it clears the rotor, will actually roll down a hill into a flat spot and will slow down just due to gravity. And I actually got lucky in this shot, and it did what it was supposed to do. It doesn't always work that way, but I was pretty happy with the first shot in this video of it actually doing what it was supposed to do. So once that happens, we again pull the car back into place on the rotary dumper. And the couplers I use for these cars are Katy couplers. So for those of you that are familiar with Katy couplers, they have little magnets, metal magnets that come down and actually look like air hoses. And if you put a magnet, Katy actually makes a magnet that you can install on the railroad track. And when you take the slack out of the coupler, which you can do by backing up and then pull forward, the coupler will actually release and uncouple on its own, which makes it real nice because you don't have to bend down and uncouple the car with your hand or insert some sort of a device like a screwdriver into the coupler to uncouple it. So it makes for a very smooth operation when using this rotary dumper. So once that happens, we repeat the process, and I'll let you just take a look at the process and listen to the sights and sounds of a fully functioning rotary dumper. So as you can see here on my second try after unloading a car, the car did not do what it was supposed to do and rolled down the hill via gravity, which probably half the time happens. But as long as the car clears the loader, that's really all I'm going for here, because you don't want the car to be sticking out over the loader when it rotates, because it can actually hit the unloaded car that has already been through the rotary dumper and derail it or cause additional damage. I do not have rotary couplers installed in these cars. As far as I know, they do not make rotary couplers for G-scale trains. If they do, or somebody knows of a company that does, please make a comment, and I would definitely be interested in checking that out. And that's also another reason why I constructed the track after the dumper to allow cars to flow downgrade by gravity and be sure that they do clear the dumper. That's also another reason why I installed the Katy magnet just prior to a car going through the dumper, so that it can be uncoupled and I can pull the remaining train away and allow that to safely clear the dumper before it is put into operation. So again, for the Katy magnet to work, if I wasn't clear enough, you have to run the coupler over the magnet, which the magnet is installed on the tracks, and release the tension by backing up, and then stopping the coupler over the magnet, directly over the center of the magnet, and pulling the couplers apart, which in theory they should pull apart and you won't have to perform any other actions to uncouple the cars. I would say about 99% of the time it works how it's supposed to. Every once in a while you'll have a coupler or couplers that will hang up, and you'll have to either perform the process of uncoupling by using your hand or inserting a device into the coupler. And as you can see, that process worked out the way it was supposed to. What this also does is once the car rolls down the hill via gravity, it has enough force, if you will, to couple the cars together at the bottom of the hill so that you don't have to go and couple all the cars after the fact. I haven't had any issues with this not happening. All the cars that have rolled down the hill and essentially joined with one another have accurately coupled, and that process has actually worked very well. So of course, once we constructed the rotary dumpers, we wanted to come up with a way to smoothly dump the coal. We didn't want to have to do it by hand because that definitely would not be a smooth operation. So what we did is we were able to control it by electronics. If you see at the upper left of your screen, there is that black older boxcar, which is what we used. And on the side of that car, there are 3 rocker switches that have been constructed into that car. Those switches operate the electronics, which in turn operate the rotary dumper. So we did something that is very unique that, as far as I know, nobody else has ever done. And it was kind of an experiment to see if it could be done, and sure enough, it worked just fine. But we actually took a RailPro module, which is the same module that's used to operate my battery operating locomotives, and we hooked it up to a couple of RC winches that I had ordered to operate this dumper. And sure enough, it worked just fine. We found that if you hook up a RailPro module to some kind of a motor, it's going to operate. And the neat thing is, and it's also very convenient, is I operate this rotary dumper with the same remote control that I operate my locomotives, which makes for a very smooth operation, as I can operate my locomotive, bring it in, and operate that by remote control, and then just switch to the rotary dumper and operate the rotary dumper by control. So you'll see here we have two winches. Again, these are RC winches that I ordered that are for RC cars, or I think this particular or these particular winches are for a Jeep. One winch operates the clamps and allows the clamps to compress down onto the car and then be released from the car. And then this other winch here actually pushes the rotary dumper over and then pulls the rotary dumper back into place. We had to use a counterweight, which is on the downhill side of the dumper, to allow the dumper to roll over freely and then allow the winch to pull it back into place. Again, it was all experimental, but it worked out just fine, and we have since had no problems with this function in the operation of dumping the coal. So I hope you have enjoyed this overview of our coal operations here on the BNSF Mountain Subdivision, G-Scale. And look forward to additional videos showing these coal operations. I will do a video that is specific on loading the coal and also that is specific on dumping the coal and go into more detail about the operations and the function. So look forward to those. Until then, please remember to hit the like button, subscribe, share, make comments, and we look forward to seeing you on future videos. Until then, keep on model railroading and keep on rail fanning. We'll see you on the next one, and thanks for watching.